Thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Joaquin Escalante. I'm with the North Central Texas Council of Governments, an air quality planner in the Transportation Department, and within that, the Clean Fuels and Energy team. With me today are my colleagues, Amy Hodges, Program Manager, and Hannah Thiesling, Air Quality Planner as well. We'll be presenting on the topic of resilient EV charging and minimizing grid impact today. Before we move any further, some housekeeping items. For the most part, I think everyone here has done it. Please keep your microphone muted until it's time to ask questions. We'll stop periodically throughout the presentation if there's any questions you may have. We'll also have time at the end for questions as well. If you haven't already, please put the name of your organization and your own in the chats to help us take attendance. And then this meeting is being recorded, and this, along with the slides of the presentation, will be posted on the Conserve North Texas website after the webinar. We'll also be sending an email following this presentation with a link to the website and further information. So this webinar is brought to you in part by NCTCOG, the State Energy Conservation Office. We partner with NCTCOG for the work that we do through a contract with them. And they work with us to provide information on energy management, energy efficiency projects within the region. And then as a part of this work, we provide webinars and workshops, technical assistance on a variety of energy management and energy efficiency, water efficiency, and renewable energy topics. And along with our contracts in working with them on this regional energy management program, we ask, if you're so inclined, to donate the value of your time today through an in-kind match form, which helps us put on these webinars and workshops and provide these resources to you here in our region on these various topics. This is for participants that aren't being funded through federal dollars, though. And the link to that form can be found on this slide. A service that NCTCOG does provide, among many others, is this preliminary energy assessment, or PEA. A copy of the form can be found on the slide here, but it can be also accessed through the link on the slide as well. And they offer cost-effective resource efficiency measures that can be implemented to decrease your energy consumption at no cost to you. This would help you in guiding development of energy management policy. They do provide facility benchmarking using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And a quick plug for that, the COG did a webinar on that particular tool, and that can also be found on the Conserve North Texas website. The assessment would also recommend maintenance procedures and help develop efficiency level guidelines for equipment purchases. So for the agenda today, we'll go into a brief overview on what the COG is, then diving into the need for resilient EV charging, followed with the Texas energy demand forecast and grid outages, minimizing the impact of EV charging, then talking about the resiliency technologies associated with that, highlighting some case studies, and then talking a little bit about the planning resilient EV charging project that we have coming up. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Amy.
Good morning, everyone. Amy Hodges. I'm a program manager here with the North Central Texas Council of Governments, specifically on the Clean Fuels and Energy Programs team. My part of the team is the Energy Initiatives and Community Readiness part of the team. So just a quick overview before we get into resiliency about who we are and what we do. So as the North Central Texas Council of Governments, we do regional planning and coordination for 16 counties here in North Central Texas. We are also the Metropolitan Planning Organization, so we do transportation planning for 12 of these counties. Our team is also the Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities Coalition, which is hosted by the North Central Texas Council of Governments. And Lori Clark is our Senior Program Manager and is also our Clean Cities Director. Next slide. So first of all, what we mean by resilient EV charging is the ability to charge a vehicle during a grid outage. And so why the focus on resilient EV charging? Why do we have that need? Well, we're seeing a gradual increase in the deployment of EVs by local governments. And also, we're starting to see these electric vehicles assigned to critical roles within the local governments. For example, in North Texas, we have EVs assigned to police, non-pursuit, and detective vehicles. We have an electric refuse truck in Plano, and there's an electric fire truck that will be deployed in the city of Denton. That picture on the right is of the electric refuse truck, by the way. And then the ability to charge these vehicles as they're assigned to critical roles in the event of a grid outage becomes vital for safety and continuity of critical operations. And we think it's very important to include this kind of planning going forward. Playing into this need is the fact that ERCOT forecasts a marked increase in the demand on the Texas grid in the coming years as our population and economy continues to grow. So we're going to take a look at ERCOT's forecast and what's expected to drive that demand. And then lastly, here on the slide is a link to a white paper that we wrote, linked here. So we'll be covering the key takeaways of that paper today. This was primarily developed under contract with the CECO, Texas State Energy Conservation Office. We invite you to read that white paper for more detail. Okay, next slide. So, speaking of the increase in electric vehicles in North Texas and in Texas in general, as the Council of Governments and Clean Cities, we track EV registration. So here on the right side of that table, you can see that Texas now has over 330,000 registered electric vehicles. Compared to a year ago, that's a 44% increase. And then below that, you see the major metropolitan areas. So here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we have over 120,000, which is a 36% increase from a year ago. The map on the left is actually a heat map of the density of electric vehicle registration. If you go to our website, you can see the whole state as a heat map. We're just showing you our 16 counties. The darker the red, then that's more dense electric vehicle registration. And then overlaid on that are the locations of EV chargers. Okay, next slide. So one reason we're even talking about resiliency is the fact that we do experience grid outages in Texas. The Department of Energy tracks reported power outages and their causes. And these outages can be caused by many things. There's actually quite a list, including severe weather, other natural disasters, human error, vandalism, equipment failure, falling trees, high energy demand, planned outages, and the list goes on. Analysis has been done on the Department of Energy data, and based on that analysis, it shows that of all major U.S. power outages reported between 2000 and 2023, 80% were due to weather. So weather happens. Severe weather is going to continue to happen. On this slide, we're showing Texas data for outages. So in the last 5 years, ending in 2023, we had 263 outages, and this is by all causes. But what is notable here is that Texas leads the nation in outages in the last 5 years due to all causes. Also notable is the outages we've experienced in the last 5 years compared to all outages in the last 20. 60% of the outages have happened in the last 5 years. So this reinforces in our minds the need to plan for resilient EV charging. Okay, next slide. So we took a close look at ERCOT's annual energy forecast. They actually updated this past summer their 2024 ERCOT system planning long-term hourly peak demand and energy forecast. And you can get to that. There's a link here underneath this graph to get to that. And everyone will get the slides. They'll be posted on the Conserve North Texas website. But what's notable, here's a graph taken from their forecast. The blue line shows the historical annual energy from 2002 through 2022. And you'll notice that that blue line is fairly flat. This is notable considering that Texas has experienced a large increase in population during that time period. In fact, from 2000 to 2022, we had a 43.4% increase in population. And with that comes economic growth, an increase in the number of homes and schools and buildings, industrial facilities and data centers, and all of those are requiring electricity. And not only that, they're requiring electricity, but the data centers and the crypto mining are also needing to be cooled. So that is taking additional energy. But so far, the ERCOT power grid has been able to mostly keep up with this increased load, and that's primarily due to new generating capacity added. And then also part of that is increase in wind and solar, and the increase in utility scale energy storage. So all that's helped avoid rolling brownouts and blackouts in recent years. The disaster of February 2021, aside from that. So the ERCOT grid does have a lot of capacity. So the orange line on this graph is showing what ERCOT is forecasting. So it's showing from 2024 to 2030 a really steep increase of 17.1% in the annual growth rate of the energy annually. So let's take a look at why they're looking at that type of increase in the coming years. Next slide. Oh, well, we have a polling question. Wanted to break things up a bit. If you'll take your phone, scan the QR code, you should be able to answer this question that's on the slide. And we will wait to about 60 seconds, maybe not that long, but the answer is on the next slide, so we're not going to advance quite yet. All right, people are answering. Nice. Oh, pretty evenly spread. Okay, that's interesting. People are changing their minds. Okay, not seeing much movement. So a lot of people are thinking the 10%, next is the 1.25, and the next is 3. Okay, well, let's go to the next slide. So in coming up with their demand forecast, ERCOT did a forecast on the number of EVs they think are going to be in the state by the year 2029. So we're talking about the bottom part of this slide, and there's the answer. ERCOT is forecasting that EV charging by 2029 will only add 1.25% to their load forecast. But they are predicting over 1 million EVs will be in the state of Texas, with most of those being in the ERCOT territory. So that's notable because a lot of people are arguing, well, we shouldn't be pushing, the electrification of transportation because the grid can't handle it. But ERCOT is not thinking that's going to be a really big factor. In fact, the top part of the slide is speaking to what they think are going to be the largest contributors. And those are the technologies, the newer technologies that have an increased need for computing power, such as cryptocurrency mining, data centers, hydrogen production, large industrial loads, such as liquefied natural gas facilities, oil and gas exploration, chemical processing plants, and hydrogen production facilities. In these facilities, this is where you're going to get into a lot of heating and cooling need, especially in the data centers, big cooling need. And then artificial intelligence is really a contributing factor to anything with a computing need because we're finding AI in almost everything these days, and that really increases the computing load. All right, next slide. Included in ERCOT's document is a graph. I know this is kind of small. You'll be able to see it easier when you get the slides. But over the coming years from 2024 through 2030, this is showing the breakout of the load growth just for large load. And you can see the part of the bars for data center is really getting a lot larger. Hydrogen industrial is expected to grow. Crypto growing just a little bit, but not too much. And that red line sitting on the top, that's the oil and gas. That's not adding a big. It's growing a little bit, but not near the growth of the data center part of the bars. Okay, next slide. So even though EV charging is not expected to contribute substantially to the forecasted load, it is important to manage our EV charging as efficiently as we can to maximize the ability of the ERCOT grid to absorb the impact of all this additional load growth, and with as little additional investment as possible. So there's two things primarily that fleet managers can do as they electrify their fleet and are charging their vehicles. One is to comply with any conservation requests that are issued by ERCOT. ERCOT has an early notification system. It's called Texas Advisory and Notification System. And this is where there's 3 levels of warning. The weather watch, the voluntary conservation notice, and then the conservation appeal. It is voluntary to conserve power, but if you are really adding to load, this is something that you'll want to comply with just to help out. The second thing that fleet managers can do is to avoid charging when the grid is most constrained. So we looked at the ERCOT monthly outlook on resource adequacy. Those reports, we looked at those from March to October of this past year. And we saw that from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. is when there's the highest risk of these conservation requests being issued. So this is a time that can be avoided to help out to avoid these conservation requests. And then if you have enough chargers network that would warrant a smart charging management system, that can optimize your charging based on a lot of factors, and that will be spoken to here in a coming slide. Okay, next slide. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Joaquin.
Thanks, Amy. I'm going to keep my camera off. My bandwidth is a little wonky, but you guys already saw my face. So the chart here on the slide can also be found on the white paper that's being referenced throughout the presentation. And it's listing the various technologies that we're going to be mentioning here in the presentation, and where they align as far as if they enable off-grid charging, lessening the grid impact. There's also a few case studies that are going to be mentioned, and whether they're being used in those as well. So to start off, like Amy had just mentioned, smart charging technology, smart charging management, sorry, is a system that dynamically optimizes the charging across multiple chargers. So it's software that helps lessen the grid impact. And in its use, it considers the following, which are constraints on the grid as they happen, as well as electricity prices, and providing charging when, um, if so choosing, which I'm sure most would, when electricity prices are at their lowest. EV battery percentages, those EVs that are connected to the charging, or the various chargers. Uh, Desired charge level, if in case a full 100% charge is not needed, um, and maybe having that spread around at various levels to the EVs that are being connected. It'll take into account the charging capacity for those EVs as well, and can be put on a timer to ensure that the charging happens at the desired times, or when perhaps maybe the grid is less constrained. Now, if the management software is integrated with distributed energy resources, which are technology that provides energy generation and or energy storage to provide electricity where needed, um, as it coordinates the various technologies. It can do so to coordinate electricity generation through the DERs that are either considered low or no carbon, to be more environmentally friendly in the charging process. So, energy storage, or battery energy storage systems, or BESS, store energy for later use and from various types of energy generation. Essentially, it's batteries, and they help lessen the grid impact. Depending on the size of the system, it is scalable as far as how much energy can be stored. And then they can work on their own or standalone off grid, as well as connected to the grid. Uh, a battery integrated charger would allow for off grid charging. And if the BESS is connected to the grid, the batteries would be charged by the grid itself. And then during an outage, uh, the battery would act as a backup power source. It could also be utilized when conservation alerts are in place, or the grid is just most constrained. Um, as far as it being integrated into a charger, off grid and standalone, uh, the charger would be relying on that battery backup of the BESS. And then it would be charged by an external power source, ideally, as well, to keep it further resilient. That could be solar or wind, or what have you. Now, the sizing considerations for BESS that one should take into consideration would be the EV charging demand placed upon it, and then the hours of off grid charging that would be needed. Below is a simplified example. So a BESS with 500 kilowatt hours of energy storage would provide around 10 hours of off grid charging, and for EV energy charging demand of 50 kilowatts. Another energy storage option is hydrogen fuel cell energy storage, where hydrogen fuel cells are integrated, or sorry, hydrogen fuel cell technology integrated with EV chargers currently are an emerging technology. The fuel cell itself uses hydrogen and oxygen to create electricity, with its emissions being just water and heat. On its own, with the charger, it would do the same as the BESS and power it's with just the fuel cell. As far as recharging, though, it would need to be fueled up with hydrogen. And then, similarly to the other energy storage option, when connected to the grid, it would act as a battery power backup. These cells used for battery backup power and stationary power for electricity generation are currently in use in microgrids, which will be touched on later in the presentation, and much larger scale applications as well. Now, solar is a resilient technology that we're mostly well aware of, and how it works. It is a renewable energy source. It, along with others, lessens the grid impact and is scalable based on its size. Um, the charger, a charger itself could be powered by solar with energy storage, like mentioned previously, or both combined. The picture on the right-hand side is an example of one of those chargers, integrating both a solar canopy, two charging ports, and integrated battery. This one is mobile as well. Um, it is solar itself can provide off-grid capabilities when integrated with this battery storage, and that battery storage would be needed for longer-term resiliency as well. Wind, another renewable energy source, like the previous example, would also come with low life cycle emissions. And those emissions would primarily come from the production process of the devices, like the wind turbines and the solar panels of the previous example. Um, Now, the efficiency gains would be um, best realized when deployed locally or closest to the end user. So the closer those turbines are to where they're going to be, the energy is going to be used, the better. And then it would also lessen the grid impacts. These turbines are scalable. We've seen, I'm sure if you've driven out through West Texas, seen these turbines. Uh, as they come in various sizes, they can provide energy from tens of kilowatts to several megawatts as well. And this is just an example, among many others, of DERs that could be added to a microgrid, which will be discussed later on. Generators, another resilient technology that we've probably been acquainted with, are powered by a variety of fuel sources like propane, diesel, and natural gas. The picture on the right shows a picture of a propane gas generator. Now, these combustion fuel generators do come with advantages and disadvantages. In a couple of slides, there'll be a table that can also be found in the paper with specific numbers on the comparisons here. But advantages would include lower upfront costs in compared to the battery and solar backup options. Because of the fuel type used in these type of generators, they do have a higher power density and fuel efficiency compared to solar and battery. Depending on the size, they could be mobile and lugged around. And as far as these example of fuel sources, propane, diesel, and natural gas, propane's carbon intensity um, or the amount of carbon created through these materials is lower than electricity generated from the Texas grid mix. Disadvantages, there are more greenhouse gases or higher carbon intensity than the rest of the technology options previously mentioned later on. Maintenance costs and fuel costs are higher than battery and solar, which will be shown on the table in the next slide or a couple slides from now. And then non-fuel operating costs of diesel and natural gas generators are higher than solar and battery. Mobile charging, similar to the previous option, electricity is generated from either energy storage, like the examples there, or propane, natural gas, or diesel. Larger scale applications of this can accommodate multiple vehicles. The picture on the right-hand side there shows an option where at least two vehicles could be charged at the same time. And then some examples of when this might be important to use is when there's no permanent charging infrastructure. Um, there maybe is something happening at the centralized location for fleet charging. It's inaccessible. This could be brought over to charge um, vehicles that are deemed priority or a group of them. Stranded EVs, similar to when you're stranded on the road, you would call a service and they would come and charge the vehicle. Power outages, of course, I previously alluded, and then inoperable chargers. In the case that there needs to be repairs and a charger is unable to do its job, this could be brought over as a temporary fix in the meantime. And then advantages deployed at any location as long as it can be transported there. And there's no need for permits or upgrades or construction since it is mobile. And this was the chart that I previously alluded to. Again, it can be found in the white paper, but it compares the upfront costs of these various options previously mentioned, non-fuel annual operating costs and fuel costs. This comes from the Environmental Defense Fund, and you can click on the link there when the slides are available on the Conserve North Texas website for further details. But that just kind of gives an average cost breakdown comparing these options. Bidirectional charging is one of the newer resiliency technologies out there. It's EVs able to discharge energy from their battery, so charging from the EV itself to something else. And because they're mobile, they would be considered a mobile energy storage as well. Some examples would be a vehicle to load, which is using the EV itself to charge, for example, an appliance or some tools. I've seen electric trucks power a television on the truck bed, and there would just be there's usually an outlet in the vehicle itself. As far as the vehicle to vehicle or V2V, that is something that's available in not all EVs, but it is increasing and is possible with the proper plug adapter and charging connector. Um, so essentially charging one EV with another. And some examples of those vehicles can be found on the right there. And then for larger scale or more heavy duty um, vehicles, EV buses, due to their battery size and potential quantity of buses at a given location, have the potential to charge multiple EVs. An example of their various battery capacities is listed there from 76 kilowatt hours all the way to 660. So, scale that up with multiple EV buses, and you have a pretty decently sized resiliency option for emergency EV charging. Okay, so before I move on and yap some more, here is our second polling question of three. If you would again use your phone to scan that QR code to answer this question here, and it's asking if in the event of an outage you needed to charge your EVs, which DERs would you choose to have at your local governments? And then select those top three options. We're just kind of curious to see what people's thoughts would be. This is all anonymous, so we're not going to know who answered what. And if none of them suit your fancy, you can put none of the above as well. But I'll leave this up here for almost a minute. See if answers are popping up. So we'll just give it a little bit longer. It looks like solar, BESS, and mobile charging are on the lead there. Give it 15 more seconds. So we have solar and BESS still. Mobile charging seem to be the favorites here. Nice to see no one's picked none of the above. Everyone's on board to trying to provide some kind of resiliency if possible. Okay. Uh, well, it seems like the leader is solar, followed by BESS, and then mobile charging, hydrogen, wind, tide, and then followed by bidirectional and mobile charging. Thanks, y'all. There we go. And then we have microgrids, which integrates a combination of the DERs previously mentioned and various electrical loads, all working as one unit, essentially a smaller version of the grid. And this could allow it to work either offline or off the grid in island mode, as it's been called in previous publications, or still be connected to the grid itself. The image there is from NREL. And if you click the link there, it can provide further information. But some advantages to this setup would be because of the closer proximity of these various devices to the end user, there would be an increased power transmission and efficiency with that. Uh, this microgrid or microgrids in general could help reduce peak demand pressures and overall enhancing the energy security of those using it. So not having to be overly reliant on the grid, of course. And then depending on what your combination of DERs would be, if you chose to go with more renewables, you could have basically energy generation that would be very low to no carbon and just be more renewable energy than the actual grid or macro grid itself, the Texas grid. And this is scalable just based on what it is that you're connecting and how many of these devices you're connecting as well. So a few case studies that we mentioned in our white paper and then I've posted on here. Locally here in Texas anyway, we have one from the city of Allen, and it's their Super Hub project by XCharge North America, where they are putting together 3 megawatts of battery storage for 20 charging spaces. Outside of Texas, they're a little bit more ambitious. The U.S. Department of Agriculture Forest Service does have a remote charging station, I believe in Oregon, using a combination of solar and battery storage to power 5 vehicles in their fleets. They actually are using in the solar slide earlier in the presentation, they're using that particular charger for that. The city of Phoenix, Arizona, did create a transportation electrification action plan outlining their process to transition 200 of their gas-powered light-duty vehicles to EVs by 2030. They plan to use a combination of energy storage and microgrids in that endeavor, and we'll be implementing managed charging and fleet use guidelines to reduce their expenses and demand charges during peak times. And then Montgomery County, Maryland, this one was pretty cool to learn about. There are 2 products that they have. One has been fully deployed, which is the Brookville Smart Bus Depot. That is a microgrid of 3.4 megawatts, which is a combination of energy generation and storage. And then they broke ground on a new project June of this year, their Equipment Maintenance and Transit Operations Center will be fully capable to be offline or off the grid, being powered by 5.5 megawatts of solar, 2 megawatts of battery storage, and then 1 megawatt hydrogen electrolyzer. They plan to use all this to power their EV buses and hydrogen fueled buses as well. Through the paper that we worked on, the white paper, there are some challenges and considerations that we'd like you to take into consideration. Um, when it comes to where various local governments may be at with EV adoption and readiness, it may be a little bit difficult to get um, everyone on board or city planners to begin the planning process. But in delaying that process for EV charger resiliency, there would be a greater financial and time impact as the longer that is delayed. Um, another challenge in implementing all this is that there is some lag time in seeing um, online what chargers are active and available, um, the status of those chargers, and there's not really any information on resiliency integrated into these chargers, all of which would be very helpful for planners to take into consideration for planning efforts on chargers in their particular region, um, and focusing on which chargers in their region should be prioritized as far as getting resiliency elements included into it. Uh, something else is the lack of risk assessments has been found um, within the region to convey the need for resilient EV charging. Um, with that, uh, that could just be well. Let me backtrack. Given how we talked about the severe weather impact on the grid and affecting the grid reliability, it's important to continue and begin risk assessment for local governments as we continue to adopt EVs into our fleets and make sure that they're able to be charged in the event of critical operations as they're slowly being adopted in that format. And then also in consideration with that, determining the strategic location of these resilient EV chargers within their jurisdictions by doing this risk assessment, the number of these chargers that would be needed, and considering the types of resiliency technologies that would be integrated into said chargers. Um, lastly, we realized that city budgets are tight and there may be a lack of staff and resources, particularly in the rural locations of our region. And what we encourage there is for local governments to partner with like-minded organizations and other partners in the region or in their area to help tackle this need for future EV charger resiliency in their infrastructure. And then just a few next steps that we outline as well. Like we've already mentioned, there are some examples out there of successful implementation of this charging infrastructure. And we encourage you to reach out to those peers to learn about what they've done, how they've gone about it, and how you can get started. Then also learning about the various technologies that are available. We, through this presentation, have provided you a short list of what you could look into. And then make sure to consider these technologies when planning procurements of your EVs in the future and building out that EV infrastructure to put that all into consideration all at once and make that job easier and more cost effective and efficient of your time. And then, like previously stated, through the data that's out there, avoid charging between the hours of 7 to 9 p.m. when that demand is the highest. Before I turn it over to Hannah, one last question here, just a yes or no. Do you think, or sorry, do you need to consider resiliency in your charging of EVs? Um, just hit yes or no there. I'll give about um, almost a minute. Just to feel out what the audience thinks. And if you don't consider the need to consider resiliency in your EV charging, uh, I'd be curious to know why. Maybe towards the end of the presentation, if you want to unmute and give some reasons there. But it seems like everyone is on board um, with providing this resiliency. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass it over to Hannah, and it's all yours.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad everyone's on board. So moving forward, the COG will be working on a project titled Planning Resilient EV Charging in North Texas. And the objective is to create a resilient EV charging plan for the region. Hopefully the plan will be implemented and enhance critical infrastructure. And after our research and drafting phase of the plan, we will be evaluating these strategies and equipment through a tabletop scenario and a technology demonstration in the field to ensure its feasibility and relevance. And then hopefully this plan will be a useful tool for guiding stakeholders with recommendations to ensure critical EV travel and emergency scenarios, for evacuation routes, critical facilities and services, and freight operations. If you go to the next slide, please, we have a little bit more information on the project. Thank you. So it was funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Department of Energy Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. We were awarded $1.5 million, and this will be a 30-month project. It was just initiated in October of this year, so we're expected to finish early spring 2027 with our final resiliency plan. The project is spearheaded by our transportation and emergency preparedness staff, and we'll be collaborating with several identified key regional partners. And then there is lots of room for collaboration with additional regional stakeholders. So we do invite you, if you are interested, to please reach out to us. But here listed below are our key partners. A couple of them: DFW International Airport, Encore, DART, the City of Irving, City of Dallas, Dallas County, NTIA, City of Fort Worth, and Tarrant County. And these stakeholders are providing support in a multitude of ways, providing us access to their equipment and fleets and infrastructure, sharing their data and subject matter expertise, engaging with us as stakeholders, participating in actual exercises. So going out into the field and shutting off the power and seeing if this equipment we've identified actually works. And then, of course, participating in our plan development, offering their input, and helping us to distribute it and eventually adopt it. So if you are interested, please contact us and let us know. We would love to have you collaborate with us. And I'll pass it back off.
Thanks, Hannah. So just some closing reminders before we close out the presentation and open it up for any questions you may have. Here is again a link to the white paper that we referenced throughout the presentation on the Conservative North Texas website. A reminder again, if you feel inclined to complete the in-kind matched form, which helps us provide these webinars and workshops through our work with CECO on the contracts that we have with them. And then we also have an additional form, a webinar evaluation form that you can click on the slide when we send it over, and on the Conservative North Texas website. It'll help us understand what you thought of the webinar itself, of course, but also any future topics that you would like for us to touch on at a future date, future workshop, or webinar. And then a quick plug for an upcoming workshop that we have in the month of January on the 16th from 10 to 11:45 in the morning at the COG offices in the Transportation Council Room. we'll be having a workshop on the local government energy reporting requirement from CECO, and providing guidance on how to fill that out will be a representative from SPEAR, Sean Auckland, and she'll be walking step by step through that entire process in case you have any questions, and those can be answered there in person with her. We'll also have a representative from SECO um, at the workshop itself to highlight some of their programs. And if you have any questions for them, they'll be there to take them as well. And that registration link can be found on the slide as well. And all this information will be provided in a follow up email to those in attendance today and those that have registered. And with that, just wanted to remind you how to contact us. Our individual emails are there, as well as the general energy email, energy@nctcog.org, for any questions you may have for us that we may not be able to get to today, or you just want to contact us in the future. With that, I'm going to stop talking and just open it up. If there are any questions that people may have for us today, we have about a little bit over 5 minutes left.
There's been a little bit of discussion in the chat, which is interesting. Robert asked how many people have received a charge from another vehicle for their EV. I know this is kind of new technology and not many people have done it, but it is possible if you have the right equipment. But no one replied to his question, so I guess I'm assuming no one has done that quite yet.
Is there anything else? I'm looking through the chats. Yeah, the slides will be provided. I think, yeah, with the links active that you can click on. Oh, okay, you replied to that. Okay, well, I think that all the questions have been answered in the chat. There's nobody else that would like to step forward and unmute themselves? Oh, there's a question. Do you see a larger demand for mobile charging in the near future? Mobile charging specifically, I don't know. I don't have any specific data on that specific type of charging.
I could see, local governments needing mobile charging from time to time, especially if they're waiting on EV chargers to be implemented. Sometimes there's a backlog of waiting the equipment and possibly a transformer that needs to be deployed or something like that. In the meantime, your electric vehicles have arrived, but you don't have a charger in place. Well, then a mobile charger could help fill that gap. Robert's posted another question in the chat directed at all the EV drivers out there. Have you ever run out and gotten stuck because you run out of charge? I have a plug-in hybrid, so that has never happened to me. So I haven't run out of gas. And then another question, are there any programs in Texas that seek maybe to eliminate the energy wasted for curtailment of wind or solar? Not that I know of. Okay, some responses in the chat to the questions.
Oh, there was a question from James about any thoughts on potential federal funding changes through budget reconciliation?
Well, with a change in administration at the federal level, I don't know. I think that remains to be seen. But anybody else want to express an opinion on that?
Well, those are all good questions. It looks like we're at the end of the webinar at this point. So if you guys have any other further questions, feel free to reach out to us through the email that we'll send out shortly after this and reply there, or reach out to us through the emails that you'll find in the slides that will be provided on the Conserve North Texas website. Thank you everyone for being here today. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.